Major funding for these programs is provided by grants from Capital One Bank and Perfect Building Maintenance, Murray Hill Properties, SJP Properties, Cushman & Wakefield, Greenberg Traurig, LLP, New York Community Bank, Bank of America, Kilroy Metal Products, New York's Window Company. Additional funding is provided by Akron Gold Brothers, LLC, Briarwood Organization, C.B. Richard Ellis, City Investment Fund, Essex Capital Partners, Excel Realty Advisors, First American Title Insurance Company of New York, First Service Williams, Gemini Real Estate Advisors, Hal Fettner, Durst Fettner Residential, Helmsley Spear, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, James Orphanides, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Madison Realty Capital, M&T Bank, Meridian Capital Group, Newmark Knight Frank, Muss Development, Palin Enterprises, Rosenthal & Rosenthal, Signature Bank, Sterling & Sterling, Stephen Napolitano, Stonehenge Partners, Studley, the Moynihan Group.
Hello, my name is Michael Stoller. You know, there are people who truly have built New York. They've built New York from the ground up, and today I'm very lucky to have one individual who is a builder, a developer, a contractor, who is a City College graduate, Frank Sciame, Chairman and CEO of F.J. Sciame Construction. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
So, you know, I always tell people ages. I think you're 58, right?
58.
Born in New York City, grew up in Brownsville.
Right.
And as you said to me when we met, you remember taking newspapers. And tell me what you did with the newspapers to go to Moe's.
I regretted telling you that story, but it's true. I would actually collect newspapers in a wagon and bring them to the junkyard, where they would weigh them and give you a few dollars. There were actually older men with these big push wagons that made a living doing that. But that's when I realized I don't think I was in it for the money, because I'd work half a day, weigh the papers, get paid, and it would buy me a nice pretzel
and an egg cream
at the candy store.
Because a good egg cream can't be done.
And that would be a day's work gone.
Now, so when you were about 12, you moved from Logan Street and you went to Howard Beach.
Right.
And when you were at Howard Beach, you told me, at Mr. Diff's, some hamburgers. But did you ever realize that you were going to be a builder, an architect, or a contractor when you were a youth?
Yeah, I mean, I always loved to work with my hands. Building, even in Brownsville before I was 12, at the early age, working along with my father, who's my hero. He was a union painter, but also a carpenter. And we would build things, whether it be go-karts, forts, anything I could build. When we moved to Queens, I got the job at the local hamburger stand, or hamburger store. Was like a McDonald's, but not nearly as successful, because that was the job that was available.
But you were saying to me, and it's true, you know, thank God your parents, your father Frank and your mother Ann, are here and in Florida, okay? And your father was, he was a craftsman. He was a union painter, but a craftsman, and also who really molded and changed, grew your life to become what you are. So you went to high school in Jamaica.
Right, Jamaica, Queens, Thomas Edison, technical course.
And then you graduate, and then you decide to go uptown. I mean, you know, guys from Brooklyn and Queens, we never went to Manhattan. I mean, there must have been a rude awakening going up to City College uptown.
Well, City College had a great engineering program.
Great program.
And that's where I started, in the engineering department. But it was such a good program. It really was more geared to research scientists, and that wasn't what I was going to be comfortable at doing. So I realized that this isn't for me, and looked at some other schools that they had at the college, at the university, and the School of Architecture was something that appealed to me, and it turned out to be just the right choice.
Now, you said when you were going to City College, you were also working, doing some construction work, hair salons, and
right.
other.
You know, in the early '70s, late '60s, early '70s, these new hair cutting places were the rage. You know, where you would go in there and get your hair cut. Men would have their hair styled, the women would get their hair cut, and we used to build out these shops. Really just to make a day's pay and hire the subcontractors and coordinate all the work, even do the design. But it ended up, looking back on this, was really just to make a day's pay. But it was fun.
So now you graduate City College, what, in '74?
Right.
And then you go to work for a company called D. Foley and Company?
D. Foley Masonry.
D. Foley Masonry. And what do you do with D. Foley Masonry? This is an architect.
Well,
okay,
this is what happened.
you were a trained architect.
Yeah, my wife Barbara, who I met in high school and is still married to, high school sweetheart, who was at that time my secretary. You know, she was really my secretary
the story,
at the same time.
She was working at
One Chase
Manhattan Plaza.
You
were very lucky. You had somebody who was working in the aerospace division to type in your letters.
Exactly, very lucky. Well, she had found this ad, and they were looking for an architect. And, you know, she really wanted me to be an architect. But I knew I was not the next Frank Lloyd Wright. So since she found the ad, and it happened to be working for a contractor, I said, Barbara, good deal. I found a job. Just, what is this? It's working for a masonry subcontract. So, what does that have to do with architecture? But she understood that that was really my passion, building, as much as liking good design, but not being able to create it. So that was my first job, and it was a great experience.
But that was a great experience because you really estimated, you learned, and you did construction, and then subsequently you find out about this ad for this company, Core and DeResta. But I think the story is even better. I think the story with the Lord and Taylor.
Well, what happened was the masonry company was overstaffed, and they had told the president to get rid of everybody because they weren't making money. And the president there said, well, let's get rid of everyone except Frank, because he had a workhorse. You know, when you love something, working 80 hours a week is really learning, and it's not work. So Mr. Corin at Core and DeResta, who owned the masonry company, which I didn't really know until that point, said, well, if he's that good, you send him to me. So you remember everything. So I bought a suit at Lord & Taylor and got changed. I think in the store, they hemmed it for me. I waited. And then I went across the street or a couple blocks away to 90 Park Avenue where Core & DeResta had their office.
And now Core & DeResta, you know, in today's world would be a major contractor. I mean, somebody similar to what you've been doing in the construction business, right?
Yeah, they were a major contractor, very professional at what they did, you know, located on Park Avenue. This was a real adventure for a kid from Brownsville.
Now, this was the original 90 Park Avenue, which was the architectural building.
Across the street, across the street from 101 Park Avenue.
101 Park, which was it.
Exactly. And there is when the light bulb went off, because I realized that what I was doing in terms of building these haircutting shops, people were actually getting paid fees for. And I enjoyed what I was doing, working for them, doing relatively small jobs by their standards.
So now, this is like June. You and Barbara are getting married in September, and then Mr. DeResta offers you a great job, like tripling your salary. Frank, take the job. And what do?
Well, I had said to Mr. Corin that I was leaving, and he accepted it. And fortunately, I ran out and made my business cards. And then 2 weeks later, they had
It wasn't
landed,
hard, FJ Sciame.
Right, FJ Sciame Construction. And 2 weeks later, they had landed some work, and they needed someone. So Mr. Corin had said, we'll make you a senior project manager. And it was about double my salary. But doubling your salary then or now is a big deal. And I really had to pause and think about it, getting married in 3 months. But I said, you know, if I don't try now, I don't think I ever will.
So thank God you worked hard making money, because he had $2,500, right? You know, from some of the salons, some of the other jobs, Foley and Core and DeResta. And now, then you went to Mom and Dad, and you got $5,000.
Mom gave me $5,000 from her war bonds.
Right, so Mom took her from the war bonds, and FJ Sciame opens up in Queens, right? In your apartment.
In my apartment in Woodhaven, Queens.
In Woodhaven, Queens. And one of the interesting things, you know, you're hustling to do business, and you want good clients, and one of the clients, which is another university, you get a job you got a job fixing a gate at NYU for $75, right?
Exactly, on Green Street.
On Green Street.
I tried to
but what
photograph
happened from the gate? A lot of business came out of the
from
gate.
the gate, a $75 gate, then I got a $2,900 stucco masonry job using my experience at Foley Masonry, and then a dance floor for about $50,000, and then a pretty big
the classroom for $128,000.
the laboratory for $178,000. I remember the price. That was a big job. And then once we built that successfully, we began to build credibility.
Right, and I think one of the major jobs that really gave you initial credibility was the renovation job that you did at the Sotheby's Park Renee Galleries on Madison Avenue. And the interesting thing is, you said to me, his young Frank, and they were worried that, the paintings and all this, you were able to do the work with, and you didn't have to move the paintings.
Yeah, they were doing 300 lineal feet of skylights over the top floor of Sotheby's, which partially held the storage of their paintings. And we were, I guess, naive enough or bold enough to say we could do it without their having to move the paintings. And we came up with what was really a foolproof way of doing the skylights. I don't want to get into it, but it was very successful.
And it was doubly successful because at that time there was an individual who remembered your good work, and Sotheby's was planning, they had this space on 72nd Street and York Avenue, and what happened then?
Yeah, I'll never forget, it was Arnold Kagan, who was the facilities manager for Sotheby's, which is a relatively small group that he had. He asked me if I ever built a $6 million project. And I said no. And he said, and remember at that time the largest project we had built was like 500,000. So I immediately said, I said no. He said, do you think you can? And I said, absolutely. Now that would be like today, somebody asking me if our large project is 200 million. It would be like someone asking me if we could do a $2 billion project. I wouldn't say immediately, yes. I think I'd ask what the schedule is, what the financing is, but there was this, enthusiasm and belief, perhaps naivety.
But that truly was a turnaround.
That was the turnaround, because Arnold Kagan and Oliver Lundquist, rest his soul, who was the architect of both the Skylight and Sotheby's and became a dear friend, believed in me and gave us the chance. And after we completed that project on a very ambitious schedule, the world figured, well, there must have been an exhausting search to get a CM.
They didn't realize that. They didn't realize there were 20 specifications.
No dog and pony show, no 20 firms to compete against. It was just.
Yeah, but how many people were at F.J. Sciame at that time?
Not many. I mean, we probably had about 8 to 10 people in the office, but hardworking people willing to work 2 weeks at a one if they had to. And that was an opportunity to hire some good people, which we did. When you get an opportunity to do a larger project, if you handle it properly, and if you have a good client, I mean, Sotheby's was a great client, the architect was a terrific gentleman, and we worked together as a team.
And Sotheby's really, as you said, evolved. And I think one of the great things that people say about Frank Sciame and Sciame Construction, F.J. Sciame, is you do quality special projects that people know about. I mean, over the years, let's talk about some of those projects, and then we'll go down to Lower Manhattan. I mean, let's discuss some of those.
Well, Sotheby's was Sotheby Park Burnett. It was a very prestigious auction house at the time. Another project that came up was the Mercedes-Benz showroom on Park Avenue, which was originally designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, but they didn't implement his original design. So when that project came out, it wasn't a big project, maybe $1 million, but we figured out a way that you could actually do the glass ceiling in glass. Everyone thought it could only be done in plastic. So going the extra mile, we came up with some mirror contractors, actually did a mock-up, and saved the design, or actually was able to reproduce the design the way Frank Lloyd Wright wanted it. And that added to our portfolio of quality work. One quality project leads to another.
Right, but and many of them were when you were in the Lincoln Building, then at 342 Madison Avenue. There were a number of them, and which we'll go over. But something happens later. It's 1990, and you're really getting involved with the work at the Seaman Museum. What happened over there?
Yeah, we're doing a project for the Siemens Church Institute, which was designed by Jim Polchak, a really great architect. And it was an exciting project, challenging project. You know, it looks like a ship on top of a building. The building had to be sympathetic to the historic Greek Revival buildings in the seaport. And it was at that time, standing on top of the Siemens Church Institute steel, that I looked at this neighborhood, this great collection of Greek Revival buildings. And it was a bad recession at that time. It was in the, I guess, the early 90s.
Early 90s, no question.
And buildings were practically crumbling, this building that I bought. So I bought a building one door down from the Siemens Church Institute on Water Street and turned it into our headquarters, which at the time was a reach. The market wasn't good. It even got worse afterwards. But eventually, the market changed, the Giuliani revitalization plan, and we were able to turn that into condominiums and move to a larger building at 80 South Street, which was a building that we came up with some development ideas for. But it was the Siemens Church Institute that really got me involved in the historic Seaport District.
And after that, you got involved with the Front Street project.
Yes. Yes, we did a very exciting project on Front Street. This was a collection, again, of Greek Revival buildings going back to, a couple may have been in the late 1700s, mostly in the 1800s. And they were collapsing. I mean, the beauty of the seaport is that buildings lean on each other for support. But these buildings were beginning to lean on each other towards collapse. The city owned it and sold it to us for an excellent price because we explained that it would be expensive to bring these buildings back, and there were three vacant lots. So what we did is we restored the existing buildings and built 3 new buildings, all very much in keeping with the historic Seaport District.
And since it was historic, you were able to get tax credits for the historic
We got
zone.
the historic tax credits. We had to get landmarks approval. That added to our pro forma in terms of the tax credits.
And then you even got Liberty bonds.
Liberty bond financing, and it ended up being 95 units and about 11 retail projects on the ground floor. One of the things that we committed to do to the city, and one of the reasons I think we won the proposal, was to breathe life onto that block. We said we would not put apartments at the ground floor, which many of the buildings in the area do because the rents were higher for residential than it would for retail in the Seaport. And we have a great block right now that seems to be thriving. Tenants, Jack's Coffee, dry cleaner, just what we envisioned.
Right, you created the unique session over there. Now, let's talk a little bit about 80 South Street. I mean, because many people remember that was going to be the townhouses in the sky.
Right, right. Well, that was a story that is one that will always be special in my life. It turned out to be a great real estate investment, and I'll tell you why, even though we didn't build the tower. We had this property at 80 South Street, and we knew that we can buy air rights to develop the property. No one wanted to buy the air rights, so the Chase Manhattan had a bank of air rights.
What, $10 a foot?
$10 a foot. We have 50,000 square feet of air rights at $10 a foot, which allowed us to build 185,000 square feet. We subsequently, with our partners, Cord Meyer, purchased another 100,000 square feet.
So you were able to build 300.
Build the 300,000 square foot tower.
But the $10 a square foot air rights were great.
Exactly. So here we are, and I get a call from Santiago Calatrava. I'll never forget it, on a Friday afternoon. And he said that he would like to have coffee with me at the Four Seasons Hotel. So I knew of Santiago Calatrava, and it was a Saturday in August, and I said to my wife, Barbara, look, I've got to meet Santiago. I think he wants us to build the Symphony Hall in Atlanta or something. I've got to meet him. So I meet him, and we recognize.
Or the sphere that he was building in Chicago too.
Well, not yet. That wasn't even conceived of yet.
That's nothing now.
That's nothing now. So we meet, and he said to me, Frank, Kevin Roach of Roach Dinkalo said that you could help me finish my townhouse. Finish his townhouse. Though, I mean, not even build his townhouse. And here I am saying, what am I doing here? But in 15 minutes, the genius and charm of this man came through. We helped him finish his townhouse, and he needed it done by September because his daughter was going to the...
Now, where was the townhouse?
It's on Park Avenue. But his daughter was going to the Lycée Français, and he said, Frank, it must be ready for my daughter. She's going to school in September. And I didn't want to tell him we were building the Lycée Français. I didn't know if it was going to be finished. But we meet at the townhouse, help him finish the townhouse, and then he brought in his sculpture. And if you look at his sculpture, one of them really imitates the towers, the townhouses in the sky. And together, we conceived of this idea of the townhouses in the sky. And it was launched, tremendous press. We had actually stopped the press because I refused to go forward with it unless we had pre-sold the units. This was not a speculative building. And when we couldn't find enough buyers for many different reasons, we just pulled back. And I took a lot of pressure from many different people. I actually saw the Stoller report once when you were asking Ken Swick about the tower, and refused to build it. Look, maybe my children will build the tower. I still believe it will be the greatest, one of the great buildings of the world.
There's a great movie that I remember growing up. It was The Apprentice of Duddy Kravitz.
Okay.
And it was a story about this Canadian, and he always wanted to own real estate. And he said, Duddy, you know, one day you too could build, own land. And I said, as I say, you know, it really, ownership of land and real estate goes back to Abraham in the Old Testament. Because when his wife Sarah dies, he goes to the Egyptians and he says, let me buy her gravesite. And they literally, it's in the Bible that he pays gold for land. And so the history of real estate and land goes back to that time. So one way or the other, eventually, forget recessions, the other thing, one day something will be happening. It may be the penthouse in the sky, it may be something else, but it's a great site, it's a great location, and you, I mean, your involvement, the chairman of the Seaport Museum, chairman of the LEM, you know, you've been involved with this for years. Now, let's talk about some of the great projects. I mean, you know, my studio is right near the Morgan Library, and you did a project for the Morgan Library that people couldn't believe. I mean, what did you do over there?
That was a very interesting project. Renzo Piano had won the design competition, and he came up with the idea of finding a way to get them extra space by putting all of their collections below grade. So we had to excavate 55 feet into bedrock, and at the same time underpin the historic buildings, the Morgan House, the library, and the adjacent apartment buildings, which was a challenge in and of itself. And we created this vault, submarine doors, anchored to the bedrock, ready for a 100-year flood without penetrating the walls. And that created the additional space to create that great atrium and renovation, restoration of the existing buildings. You know, it's been really great because here's a guy that always loved building my Erector sets. And now to be working with these great architects that we learned about in school, Renzo Piano, Santiago Calatrava, is just like being a kid in a candy store. So when you enjoy what you do and you surround yourself with people who enjoy the same thing, and understand that the difference between a good building and a great building is the execution of the construction
and
details.
you know, now we go completely, we talk about the museum in the Bowery. I mean, a totally different type of building.
Exactly.
I mean, in the middle, next to the shelter, next to the Salvation Army, you build a museum over there.
Well, you know, and I think that's a great contrast because you have two different owners with two different ideas of what they want. The Morgan Library wanted the building to be as institutional as the original building. And when you look at the restoration we did, we actually laid the limestone in lead joints to imitate the original Morgan House. The building is institutional, bronze door, steel crucifixes. It's just institutional. And it's great, and it works. The new Museum of Contemporary Art had an international search and found this architect, Sana, from Japan. And they wanted a more industrial look. And yet they wanted a very sensible building. And the building looks simple, but it is extremely intricate to make sure that they could get as much gallery space as possible. And the way the architect used the light to come into the gallery, the size of the galleries, the materials on the facade, it turned out to be received wonderfully in the architectural community and the museum community. It really helped to define the new Museum of Contemporary Art.
And then Cooper Union.
Cooper Union is going to be another great project. That'll be open in September and designed by Pritzker Prize winner Tom Main. Here was a real challenge because you have the great original Cooper School, the foundation building that was built by Peter Cooper. And now you have another building that's going to house the same architecture engineering school. And Tom Main just did an incredible job using today's technology to do computer models of how the stairs and the 180-foot atrium would be. And, you know, to really be at, it's beyond the cutting edge of the industry. It's defining the cutting edge of the industry is a treat.
Then Columbus Circle, the project you did in Columbus Circle.
The Museum of Art and Design. Yes, that was another challenge.
I mean, that was a building that was hideous. I mean, it was, that was a nice comment about it.
And reinforced concrete. People were asking, why did this building take as long as it did? Every operation there involved shoring and reshoring, cutting reinforced concrete walls to create slots of light, and then to encase the existing building, the marble, demolish the marble, and then put this great terracotta stone on the facade, which really glows in different ways when the sun hits it, was another fun project.
You know, there are so many more that you've done. I mean, there's St. John's, there are so many more. But in reality, you know, now let's talk about it. You know, the inspiration of your life really, you know, was your father and your mother, and you said that to me. And now you got 4 children, right? And 3 of them are working with you. So let's talk about the children.
You know, this is a true blessing. You know, my father, as I said, was a union painter, and he had the patience of a saint. I don't have as much patience as my dad, but they really related. He had to work weekends, he had to work side jobs, but the time was quality time. The love came through, and I was busy starting a business. You know, my wife Barbara, fortunately, was willing to give up her job. She felt that she wanted to be home with the children. And I'd like to think that I was there when needed. I tried hard to do that. But it seems to have worked. We have 4 great children. The youngest is a senior at Fordham who doesn't work for us, Fiona. And they all still want to go on vacation with us, Michael. I mean, how great is that?
But you have your oldest son who's a pilot. Who's a superintendent with you, right?
Right.
His name is
Andrew.
Andrew, and then you have your
FJ,
your son,
middle
FJ the third.
The third, right?
Right, who's an assistant super. Then you have your daughter,
Alexandra, who's working in the development company.
and then you also have Fiona, right?
Who's thinking about law school now, which will be a great addition.
But you know what's really, besides your involvements, I think, you know, one of the great things is that you've been involved with the city college and city university, and you know it's what we say, giving back. You know, some people call it, you know, tzedakah. Tzedakah, literally, you know, people think it's charity. It's not charity. It's called responsibility. Yeah. That's what the true understanding is. And you know, with what you've done with City College. I mean, this year you and Marty Cohn are the honorees at the annual City College dinner.
Yeah. Well, you know, City College is such a special institution, and it gave myself, it gave many others the opportunity to go to school who would not have otherwise had the opportunity to go to college. And it's, you know, sure, I do give back to City College, and I, you know, on a relative scale, it's my largest charity, and there are many that give a lot more than I do, but I've made a commitment.
But you know, it's not all, you know, I always tell people there's a responsibility, it's a give, get, or do. If you can give, it's great. If you can get, it's great. And if you do, and you do all 3. Yeah. And that's the good part about it. You know, in conclusion, I'd like to say you truly have been a builder of New York, and the kid from Brownsville has done well. I'd like to thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay.
Major funding for these programs is provided by grants from Capital One Bank and Perfect Building Maintenance, Murray Hill Properties, SJP Properties, Cushman & Wakefield, Greenberg Traurig, LLP, New York Community Bank, Bank of America, Kilroy Metal Products, New York's Window Company. Additional funding is provided by Akron Gold Brothers, LLC, Briarwood Organization, C.B. Richard Ellis, City Investment Fund, Essex Capital Partners, Excel Realty Advisors, First American Title Insurance Company of New York, First Service Williams, Gemini Real Estate Advisors, Hal Fettner, Durst Fettner Residential, Helmsley Spear, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, James Orphanides, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Madison Realty Capital, M&T Bank, Meridian Capital Group, Newmark Knight Frank, Muss Development, Palin Enterprises, Rosenthal and Rosenthal, Signature Bank, Sterling and Sterling, Stephen Napolitano, Stonehenge Partners, Studley, the Moynihan Group.